Ever feel like your own worst enemy? Like those negative thoughts swirling in your head are holding you back?
You're not alone.
Well, on that note, this deep dive is all about Nancy Acosta's upcoming book, The Power of Words on the Human Soul. And she's not just some self-help guru.
No, that isn't.
She's a grandmother,
Right.
former homeschool teacher,
Uh-huh.
and she even co-authored the bestseller Latinas 100.
And you can tell her experience really shines through in this book. Working with her manuscript, what I thought was really fascinating is how she takes all this practical wisdom and ties it into these really deep insights about self-love and how that impacts all our relationships. It's not just about, like, slapping on a happy face,
Right.
It's about digging deep and actually changing the core script that's running in our heads.
Okay, so let's dive right into that. Love starts with self-love. And I have to admit, when I first read that, I was like, yeah, I've heard that before. But Acosta, she doesn't let you off that easy.
No, she does not. It's easy to say, but she makes you really feel the weight of that statement. She uses this analogy of a cup, right? You can only pour out to others what's already inside. So if you're full of self-criticism, that's going to spill into how you treat other people, how you react to different situations. It's almost inevitable.
So I'm curious, thinking about your own life, have there been times when that inner critic was just running the show? And how did that impact your interactions with, people around you? Maybe you were quicker to judge or assume the worst.
Absolutely, yeah. I think we've all been there. And on the flip side, when we're kinder to ourselves, when we focus on our strengths and embrace our imperfections, that spills outward too. It creates this positive energy that draws people in, creates a more supportive, loving environment. It's pretty amazing.
Totally. It's like that old saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
But here's the thing that really hit home for me. Acosta admits she still struggles with this. Like, she's vulnerable about how self-criticism is this constant battle for her.
That's what makes her so relatable. She's not coming from this pedestal of, I have it all figured out. She's right there with us, trying to practice what she preaches.
Which leads perfectly into her next big idea.
Yeah.
And it might seem a little counterintuitive at first. Growth requires vulnerability.
This one's huge, and this is where I think her personal experience really shines through. She compares personal growth to a tomato plant.
Okay.
Imagine you're trying to grow this tomato plant in like a dark basement, no water.
Right.
It's not going to thrive.
Not a chance. It needs the right conditions.
Exactly. And for us, those right conditions often involve being vulnerable, taking risks, and allowing ourselves to be seen, even when it feels scary.
Yeah, because if we're constantly trying to protect ourselves from getting hurt, from being vulnerable, we're never going to experience that kind of deep connection and fulfillment that comes with truly letting someone in.
And it's important to remember, being vulnerable isn't about oversharing or being a pushover, It's about being authentic, setting healthy boundaries,
Right.
knowing that it's okay to ask for help.
It's about choosing courage over comfort.
Yes.
Even if it means feeling a little uncomfortable sometimes.
And let's be real, that's not always easy. I mean, so much of our society tells us to put on a brave face, hide our struggles, pretend we have it all together.
Oh, I know. And it can be exhausting. And honestly, it prevents us from forming genuine connections. Because let's be real, we all have those moments of self-doubt, those times when we feel like we're not enough.
We're all human.
Exactly. And when we try to hide those parts of ourselves, it creates this distance between us and others.
But when we have the courage to be vulnerable, to share our struggles and our triumphs authentically, it creates space for real connection to happen.
It gives other people permission to do the same.
Exactly.
And suddenly you're not alone in your imperfections.
And that is where the real magic happens.
Absolutely. So you're saying vulnerability, it's not just about personal growth, it's also about creating a more compassionate and connected world.
Exactly. And it's interesting. Acosta connects this whole idea of vulnerability to the concept of unburdening your cargo ship.
Okay, so I have to admit, when I first read that, I thought, time for a nautical adventure. But it's so much deeper than that.
It is. She compares our lives to these cargo ships, and we all have a certain capacity for carrying burdens, right?
Right, like stress.
Stress, obligations.
Past hurts.
Yes, past hurts, anxieties, all of it. And just like a ship can become overloaded, so can we.
And what happens when a ship is carrying too much?
It sinks.
Or at least it can't function at its best. It's slow, weighed down.
Vulnerable to storms.
Yes, exactly.
And that's how we can feel, too, when we're carrying too much. We're weighed down by all these burdens, and it prevents us from moving moving forward with clarity and purpose.
Okay, so how do we even begin to unload this metaphorical cargo? I feel like a lot of people listening right now can relate to that feeling of being overwhelmed and not knowing where to start.
Absolutely, and Acosta suggests we start small. What are those little burdens, those nagging thoughts, or those commitments that you know deep down aren't serving you?
Right.
Maybe it's that negative self-talk we were just talking about, or that obligation you said yes to out of guilt.
So she's really encouraging us to get really honest with ourselves about what we're carrying and why.
And to remember, letting go of something doesn't mean that it wasn't important. It just means you're creating space for something new and potentially more fulfilling to come into your life.
It's like we're decluttering our minds and our lives, creating space for more joy, more peace, more of what truly matters.
Exactly. And that process of letting go, of creating space, often requires us to embrace what Acosta calls the power of surrender.
Okay, I have to admit, when I first read this section, I was a little resistant. I'm a bit of a control freak, and the idea of surrender felt a little, well, too passive for me.
I hear that. Our culture often equates surrender with weakness or defeat, but Acosta challenges us to see it differently.
She's not talking about giving up. She's
Yeah.
talking about letting go,
Yes.
releasing our need to control everything, and trusting that sometimes the most beautiful things happen when we allow ourselves to just go with the flow instead of constantly fighting against the current.
It's like when you're trying too hard to force something to happen, it just creates more resistance, right? But when you can surrender to the process, when you can trust that things are unfolding as they should, even if you can't see the whole picture yet, that's where the magic happens.
That reminds me of a time I was going through a really difficult career transition. And I had this very clear vision in my head of what I wanted my next step to be. But no matter how hard I tried to make it happen, it just wasn't happening.
What shifted?
I finally hit a wall, and I just broke down. And I remember saying out loud, just like, okay, universe, I surrender. I'm letting go of my plan,
Yes.
and I'm trusting that you have something even better in store for me.
Wow.
And it's like this weight lifted off my shoulders. And I felt this sense of peace that I hadn't experienced in months. And you know what? Within a few weeks, this incredible opportunity just landed in my lap, something I never could have planned for or even imagined.
It's like when we surrender, when we let go of our need to control everything, we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities that just wouldn't have been available to us otherwise.
Absolutely. It's like that quote, what you resist persists.
Mm.
When we can surrender to what is, we create space for something new and amazing to emerge.
Yes, and you know what else is interesting about surrender? Acosta connects it to the idea from self-condemnation to self-compassion.
Okay.
She talks about how our inner critic, that voice of self-doubt and judgment, can be one of the biggest obstacles to surrender.
Because if we're constantly beating ourselves up for our mistakes or perceived failures, it's going to be that much harder to trust ourselves, to trust the process, and to surrender to the unknown.
Exactly. She argues that self-compassion is essential for surrender because it allows us to be kind and forgiving towards ourselves, even when we mess up.
Which, let's face it, we all do. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. It's how we choose to respond to those mistakes that matters.
She gives this great analogy. Imagine a friend comes to you feeling down about a mistake they made. Would you berate them? Tell them they're not good enough, that they should have known better?
Of course not. I would listen with compassion, offer words of support, and remind them that everybody makes mistakes.
Exactly.
We're all learning and growing.
And yet, so often, we treat ourselves with far less kindness and understanding than we would a friend.
It's so true. We can be our own worst critics.
And that's where Acosta's advice really resonates. She encourages us to practice self-compassion, to treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to someone we love.
Because when we can be kind to ourselves, when we can forgive ourselves for our imperfections, it creates that space for growth, for healing, and for deeper surrender.
We're creating a more supportive and nurturing inner environment where we can thrive.
Which reminds me of another key theme in Acosta's book, the importance of perspective. She argues that how we perceive the world around us and ourselves has a profound impact on our experiences.
It's like that classic saying, is the glass half full or half empty? It's the same glass, the same amount of liquid, but our perspective determines how we experience it.
I'm a bit of a glass half full kind of person, but I know that's not always easy. Life throws curveballs. Sometimes it's hard to see the positive. when you're, in the midst of a challenge.
Absolutely. And Acosta acknowledges that. She's not saying we should pretend everything is always rosy. It's about recognizing that we have a choice in how we perceive situations.
We can choose to focus on the negative, the what-ifs, the could-have-beens. Or we can choose to look for the lessons, the opportunities for growth, the silver linings.
And sometimes, shifting our perspective is as simple as asking ourselves a different question. Instead of asking, why me? We can ask, what can I learn from this? Or what's good about this situation, even if it's not immediately obvious?
It's about training our minds to look for the positive, to find the good, even in the midst of challenges.
And that doesn't mean we have to be happy-go-lucky all the time. It's okay to feel our feelings, to acknowledge the difficult emotions, but it's about not letting those emotions consume us.
It's about choosing to focus on what we can control, our thoughts, our actions, and our reactions, and trusting that even in the midst of uncertainty, there's always something to be grateful for.
And that leads perfectly to another powerful theme that Acosta explores, releasing expectations. She argues that unmet expectations are often a major source of unhappiness in our lives.
Because let's face it, we all have expectations, right? About ourselves, about others, about how our lives should unfold. And when those expectations aren't met, it can be incredibly disappointing, even heartbreaking.
And what Acosta reminds us is that we can't control other people. Outcomes, situations, We can only control ourselves, our actions, our reactions, our responses.
She's encouraging us to get really honest with themselves about the expectations we're holding on to, both consciously and unconsciously.
Yes.
And to ask ourselves, are those expectations truly serving us?
Are they helping us create the life we desire, or are they holding us back from experiencing true joy and fulfillment?
It's like that quote, expectations are just premeditated resentments.
Oof, that's a good one. Because when we let go of expectations, when we surrender to what is, we open ourselves up to experiencing life with more presence, more gratitude, more peace.
And you know what else is interesting? Acosta connects this idea of releasing expectations to the concept of the ripple effect of encouragement.
Oh, I love this part. It's such a simple yet profound concept. Acosta argues that words of affirmation, even small gestures of encouragement, have the power to not only uplift others, but also to fuel our own growth and resilience.
And she shares this really touching anecdote about how her brother's unwavering encouragement helped her achieve this goal that she once thought was impossible.
I love that story. And I think what makes this concept so powerful is that it reminds us we all have the capacity to make a positive impact on the world around us simply by choosing to be a source of encouragement.
It's like that saying, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you don't know about. And sometimes a simple act of kindness, a word of encouragement, can make all the difference in someone's day, even their life.
It's so true.
We never know what someone else is going through, what challenges they're facing, what insecurities they're grappling with.
And a little bit of encouragement can go such a long way. It's like planting a seed of hope that can blossom into something truly beautiful.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about self-love, vulnerability, surrender, perspective, releasing expectations, and the power of encouragement.
Yeah.
What other gems does Acosta offer in her book?
Well, she also delves into the idea of influence, which I think ties in beautifully with everything we've been discussing. She argues that we're constantly being influenced by the world around us, the people we spend time with, the books we read, the messages we consume.
And those influences can either lift us up or hold us back.
Exactly. Acosta talks about the importance of surrounding ourselves with positive influences, people who inspire us, support our dreams, and challenge us to grow.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah. And, it's not just about the people we surround ourselves with physically. It's also about the information we consume, right?
Right.
The books we read, the podcasts we listen to, the social media accounts we follow.
It's about being mindful of what we're allowing into our minds and our hearts.
Absolutely.
And making conscious choices to focus on what is uplifting, inspiring, and empowering.
Because negativity can be contagious, If we're constantly surrounding ourselves with negativity, whether it's from the news, social media, or even, our own negative self-talk, it's going to be so much harder to cultivate a positive mindset and create the life that we want.
It's like we're feeding our minds junk food versus nourishing it with healthy, wholesome food.
And just like our physical health is impacted by the food that we eat, our mental and emotional health are impacted by the information that we consume.
So it's about being conscious, consumers of information, making choices that support our well-being.
Exactly. And you know what else is interesting? Acosta connects this idea of surrounding ourselves with positive influences to the concept of nurture.
Nurture, I love that word. It evokes such a sense of warmth, care, and support.
Exactly. And Acosta talks about nurturing as an act of intentional caring, both for ourselves and for others. It's about creating a supportive and encouraging environment where people feel safe to be themselves, to take risks, and to grow.
I think so often we associate nurture with these grand gestures. But what Acosta reminds us is that it's often the smallest acts of kindness that have the biggest impact.
It really is.
A listening ear, a word of encouragement, a helping hand, these seemingly small acts of nurturing can make all the difference in someone's life.
Because they communicate. You are seen, you are loved, you are worthy.
Yes.
And sometimes that's all it takes to give someone the courage to keep going, to pursue their dreams, to believe in themselves.
And what I love about what you're pointing out is that when we nurture others, we often end up nurturing ourselves in the process.
It's true. It's like this beautiful cycle of giving and receiving.
And it feels good.
It does.
Okay, so speaking of feeling good, personal growth, it's not always linear. There are going to be ups and downs, twists and turns along the way.
Oh, absolutely. It's a journey.
And that's where Acosta's final theme, patience, comes in.
Ah, patience. That virtue that can be so elusive, especially in today's fast-paced world.
It's true. We want everything right now. Instant gratification.
Right.
Waiting is so hard.
It is. And yet, some of the most beautiful things in life, they take time. A flower doesn't bloom overnight, a masterpiece isn't created in a day, and personal growth, that's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And Acosta reminds us that patience, it's not about passively waiting for things to happen. It's about approaching life's challenges with grace, with understanding, and a willingness to trust the process.
It's about recognizing that setbacks and detours, those are often opportunities for learning and growth, even if we can't see it at the time.
It's about having faith. Things are unfolding as they should, even if it's not according to our plan or our timeline.
And sometimes, the most challenging experiences, the ones that test our patience the most, those turn out to be the catalyst for the greatest growth and transformation.
It's like that quote, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. But sometimes, it's on the other side of patience, too.
That's a great way to put it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Nancy Acosta's The Power of Words on the Human Soul, we want to leave you with this final thought-provoking question. If you were to choose one affirmation from this deep dive to truly embody, which one would it be, and how might it impact your life?
That's a good one.
Take some time to really sit with that question. Let it marinate. Journal about it. Because the answer might just surprise you.
It might just change your life.
That's the power of words, right? They have the power to heal, to inspire, and to create a more beautiful and fulfilling reality for ourselves. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into self-discovery. Until next time, keep diving deep.